Good morning, everyone. We'd like to welcome you to the Nita M. Lowey 21st Century Community Learning Center Grant Writing Workshop. My name's James Reed. Alongside me is Cheryl Pickett. We're socially distant. We're 12 feet apart, all that good stuff. The problem is we're close enough to one another that I may hear myself on her computer and vice versa. So maybe a little technical glitches here and there, but hey, that's the world we're living in now. So as Brad said, if you have questions, feel free to either ask or go ahead and put them in the chat box, and we'll try to, from time to time, answer them if we can. If there are questions that are very technical or site specific, we may not be able to answer them on the presentation, but certainly feel free to stick around afterwards and we can get to them then, or we'll give our contact information. You could surely ask. So feel free to take breaks as you need to. Just sort of a tentative plan for us. We're going to present from 9 until 10:15, do a quick break from 10:15 to 10:30. Then we'll do lunch 11:30 to 12:30. Obviously that's on your own. And after lunch, we'll go from 12:30, conclude at 2:30, or hopefully we can get done with it earlier. So again, we want to be very open, and if you have questions, feel free to ask. And here's just sort of a quick rundown of our office, which is the Office of Quality Schools. And really why we started doing this presentation back years ago, I think this might be our 10th one, was to really help both us and you, the applicants. For you, the applicants, may give you some good tips to improve your application. And then for us, it helps in processing and not seeing the same issues over and over again that could keep a really good program from getting funded. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Cheryl Pickett.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Nice to kind of see everyone. I just kind of wanted to start talking about things to remember as we start the presentation. The contents of this presentation, these slides are only examples from previous applications for 21st Century. And just keep in mind, this is the workshop for, but, as we get more guidance or things may change, the actual application and guidance might be different than what is stated during this presentation. The workshop is informational only, and it's meant to help you write a better proposal. And attendance at this workshop will not, unfortunately, earn you any preference points on the application. So
I will add just quickly that the grant writing workshop we did before, I believe it was cohort 10 or cohort 9. 3 of the top 5 in terms of scoring actually did attend our workshop. So again, Cheryl's completely right. It is informational only, but sometimes it can really help people.
Yes, it definitely will benefit you, I think, to not point wise, but just to benefit you, just to get the information to listen in. So 21st Century Learning Centers, 21st Century is authorized under Title IV, Part B of the Every Student Succeeds Act that was passed in 2015. There may be possible changes if, sometimes the feds like to change their guidance. So just keep that in mind as we go through this. The purpose of the 21st Century Grant is to establish or expand activities in community learning centers in 3 main areas: academic enrichment, broad array of additional services, programs and activities, and then family engagement and educational development. Just remember, every site must offer all 3 of those components. That this grant is not just for homework or tutoring help.
And to just add to that quickly, Cheryl, and I joke about this, but if I had $1 for every time someone either called me or emailed me about, hey, we really want to start this great tutoring program at our district or organization, and that's great. Tutoring can be a part of a 21st Century Grant, just not all of the 21st Century Grant.
Right. So regardless if you're selling or you're serving elementary, middle, or high school, you have to remember, like Jimmy said, the only focus cannot be just homework or tutoring. So, and I'll kind of get into these in the next couple slides. So academic enrichment, as you can see, provides opportunities for academic enrichment, including providing tutorial services, particularly students who attend low-performing schools to meet challenging state academic standards in core academic subjects such as reading and math. And I believe Missouri added science. Jimmy, you'd probably know more to that. So just keep in mind, and you can kind of read through these. I don't need to read it word for word, but academic enrichment could be, you know, a cooking class in which students measure the ingredients using fractions learned in the math classroom, or newspaper publishing to promote writing, editing, and using technology, or robotics that teaches computer programming and other technology skills. So just kind of to give you some examples. So it's basically academic enrichment it's disguised teaching. It's unrecognizable to the students as it's more fun for them. You know what I mean? It's kind of disguised as learning, disguised learning. The next area is broad array. And you can read the long list of broad array of services. These will help students to become well-rounded, which is the focus of ESSA and mentioned actually throughout all the title programs. So arts, music, physical fitness, wellness, technology. Again, there's a pretty long list that tie into the demand, you know, for, like, again, that disguised learning. So, and the last one is family engagement and educational development. This offers families and students served by the community learning centers for active and meaningful engagement in their children's education, and also includes opportunities for literacy and related educational development, and for the parents as well. So these should be ongoing programs and services based on the needs assessment, in which we'll get into a little bit later on. Some examples of this would be workshops on how to support their children's education, ESL classes, computer skills for parents, financial literacy, resume preparation. Anything else you want to add to that, Jimmy?
No, I think you summed it up pretty well there.
Okay. Any questions on the three main components of the grant? Okay, the next slides are just kind of touching on some ESSA authorized activities. Again, academic enrichment learning programs, mentoring programs, remedial education activities and tutoring, well-rounded education activities, literacy programs, service learning is a big one, youth development activities, programs that support a healthy and active lifestyle, services for individuals with disabilities, programs that provide after-school activities for students who are English learners, cultural programs, telecommunications and technology, expanded library service hours, parenting skills to promote, again, that parent involvement, programs that provide assistance to students who have been truant, suspended, or expelled, drug and violence prevention programs, programs that build skills in STEM, computer science, non-traditional STEM education, teaching methods, and programs that partner with in-demand fields of local workforce or build career competencies and career readiness. So ESSA added a lot of these. They're not new now necessarily, but they added a lot more in-depth activities that could be done through 21st century.
You want to?
Okay, so just some things to consider when you're applying for the 21st century grant. Remember that the funds can only be used to supplement and not supplant any federal or non-federal funds. This means federal funds cannot take the place from non-federal or state and local funds. The 21st century funds may be used to expand or enhance, but not supplant current activities provided by existing after-school programs, whether supported by public or private funds.
Well said.
Jimmy, you want to take over here?
Absolutely. Thanks. Great job, Cheryl. And keep in mind, everything she was sort of going over as far as allowable activities, things like that. That's all the good stuff that you're going to put in your application that readers love to see. So, so thanks for giving us that background. So some things to consider before applying, because if you're familiar with the 21st Century Grant, it is quite the application and a lot of work goes into it. So the award or the grant itself is meant for immediate implementation. That means if you get the notice from us that you received the grant, there's no additional planning time. Now, if you're brand new, we certainly understand it's going to take some time to hire staff, because you're not going to hire staff prior to knowing that you have the grant or not. So we do give you a little bit of time to get going, but there's no additional planning time. And we get those calls a lot. So just keep that in mind. We want you to write this application as if, I realize we're living in a COVID-19 time. We don't want you writing your application like that. So write your application just like everything is normal. If you receive the application, then you can talk to Cheryl and myself on what the situation is with your district or your organization. With last spring, we had to really we went through a lot along with our programs about as far as keeping them paid, keeping them running. So yeah, so once funded, then you'll talk with us and we'll get an idea of what's going on in your area and how you can best serve the kids and the families there. Now, an additional piece, and this is fairly new, if you foresee for any reason that you're not going to be able to operate in year one, we can't hold the grant for you. Okay. So, and I think by hopefully next school year, we'll all be up and running again. That's the hope anyway. So that's how we want you putting your application together, as if everything is going to be normal and we're going to start back up. So any changes or lack of communication with us could result in grant termination. So any questions on any of that?
So Jimmy, in the chat box, there's a question that says, is this a reimbursement grant?
Yes, yeah, correct. And I think we'll get to that. This is reimbursement only.
Right.
And we'll get to that.
And just one more thing, Jimmy, just to add to that, you know, if for some reason, I mean, I don't know if anyone really knows at this point what they're doing in the fall, but if for some reason, you're going to be virtual in the fall, that's fine. But you just keep in mind that the requirements of the grant must still be met. And, you know, you will still have to implement that whether or not you're virtual or in person. So
absolutely,
we prefer if you just wrote the grant towards if things were back to normal and then adjust as needed, kind of on a case-by-case basis. So.
Okie doke. And here we go. Some more things to consider before applying. This is like the question was asked, we are reimbursement only. Each successful applicant must be financially stable and not be able to rely on immediate grant for reimbursement. So in other words, make sure you have the capital to start up so that you can pay your salaries, buy your supplies, and then ask us for reimbursement after the fact. Previously funded grantees must have completed all requirements of previous grants and resolved all audit findings, if any, and this includes SAC grantees. So if you're a SAC grantee currently, want to apply for a 21st Century Grant, any caps or anything like that need to be resolved. So just keep that in mind as well. And as we all know, or at least those of us who are or have been a grantee, there's a lot of reporting on a monthly basis. So please keep that in mind. A lot of data. And don't rush through the application process. Applicants often find out about the grant late in the game and throw it together quickly. This is something that I would highly encourage you to start working on now if you're interested in applying. And keep in mind that until we release the grant, which I think, Cheryl, we're looking at a late March release date.
Right.
Up until that time, you can call, you can email Cheryl, Cindy, myself, Kim, with any questions you have, and we can help you in any way. So, but once that date hits, then it has to go through a third party who then brings a question to us. And that's just so that you don't get any unfair advantages, because Cheryl and I have been doing this for a long time. So you could have a conversation with me that turns into, you know, your application being put together just because I have a tendency to ramble. So, so again, take your time with the application, get as many people involved as you can to help out with it. Okay.
Any questions?
Yeah, there's one question. What if you're not partnered with an LEA at this time, but will be in the fall? Can you still apply?
Well, so great question. You'll definitely want to be partnered with them when you submit, because there's going to be several areas where the LEA's administration is going to have to sign off. So it's fine if you're not now, but upon submitting the application, yes, you will need to be.
Well, and just to add to that too, you know, the superintendent and the LEA has to be aware of what the grant entails, because they are responsible for providing data. And we'll get into a little bit of that later, but you know, it's not just, oh, well, here, I'm going to submit this grant on this day. Can you sign it? They really need to be aware too of of what the grant entails. So
Absolutely. And that a lot of that's done for the protection of the CBOs as well. Sometimes we've seen some pushback on the sharing of data. And so all those assurances that are in the grant that if you haven't seen, you will soon. All of those are in place to protect both the LEA and the CBO, and ultimately the kids who are receiving the program and their families.
right. Any other questions?
No more at the moment in the chat.
Okay.
Okie doke, eligibility and priorities. Applicants may include public, private, or charter schools, community-based or faith-based organizations, non-for-profit agencies, or for-profit. It's essentially anyone can apply for this. If you read through this, that's been my ongoing joke for a long time. The statute also allows for a consortium to apply, which we do have a few of those. So we're going to talk about absolute priority, and when it comes to, well, really any grant, but especially our grant, absolute priority means you absolutely have to meet this. Okay. And with that, the DESE will restrict awards to applications that primarily serve students who attend schools that are eligible Title I, and 40% or more of the student population is eligible to receive free and reduced price meals. Now, the 40% piece always causes a lot of confusion, and I'm a guy that likes to use examples. So if you see the example below, James Reed School District is applying with students from 4 schools. Now, I don't want to confuse you if we say sites or we say schools, they can be one or the other. So School A has 300 kids enrolled at 52% free and reduced lunch. School B has 200 kids at 38%. School C has 400 kids at 70%, and School D has 150 kids at 35%. The easiest way to do this is take the schools that are over 40% and add the enrollments. Then take the schools that don't, add the enrollments. The bigger number wins. So if you'll flip the slide, there you go. So based on the numbers, A and C have 700 students that are eligible versus B and D, which only have 350 students not eligible. That would mean all 4 schools are eligible to be on your application. Okay. Now that was a really easy example. And I know sometimes it gets a lot more complicated, but that's the easiest way to do it. Just add them up and the bigger number wins.
So Jimmy, I just have a quick question.
Sure.
So say, and just maybe flip back to that slide. So say you said slides A and C. So those schools, so do you have to then serve if one site A's or school A, for example, that wasn't one you had intended to serve? So would you still be able to use that one, you're saying?
If you don't include School A on your application, then, okay, then obviously if you add it up, I don't think it would work at that point.
Okay, I see. Okay.
I know it seems very confusing, and I'm terrible about examples, but a lot of times if you call in, and ask, we can figure that out for you.
Thanks.
Any other questions on that?
So this may be a question that you might answer later,
Okay.
but it popped up. Can a charter school be considered as an LEA?
Yes.
Yes. Again, they're just still required to sign off and, meet the guidelines and everything of the grant.
Absolutely, they can. Competitive priority. Essentially, this is a fancy way to say bonus points, but we have to, for purposes of the grant, call it competitive priority. And these are points that you can receive if you meet certain pieces. In the past, which we will not do this again, I'm almost certain, we gave competitive priorities to applications that propose to serve middle or high school. Pretty sure we won't do that again because that turned into a big mess. Another one that's been used several times, have not had a previous 21st century grant. At this point, we don't know what the competitive priority is going to be. One thing I'll tell you though, and we'll get into this in joint submittal pretty soon, is don't craft your application around the competitive priority points. Okay. Because a lot of times if you do that, you may still get the grant, but then find out that, well, sites we actually really wanted to serve, now we can't because we went after the competitive priority. So don't craft your proposal around that, please. It certainly does help though, if you meet those areas, but don't craft and that not just for this grant, but any grant. So, because that's happened in the past, and unfortunately it ends up causing a lot of problems with the program. Certain sites can't be served now. We're missing our 30% numbers, which we'll talk about later. So yeah, but yeah, there definitely will be competitive priority points. So submitting jointly. Now, this can also get confusing because we have a lot of community-based organizations that write the grant that are obviously partnering with the school in the application process. Same thing with school districts. They may contract out with a Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, Unleashing Potential, Link, you name it, to facilitate the programming. That does not mean you're submitting jointly. So you can see the several bullets there of what submitting jointly is. Now, there is competitive priority points for submitting jointly. It is extremely rare. And I think we only have one right now, Cheryl, that's
I think so.
Submitted jointly. You do receive a couple of bonus points, but please don't craft your application just to get the submitting jointly piece, because honestly, both the LEA and the community-based organization, it's critical that they work together on all phases. One entity has to handle the finance. I can just tell you it's really, really hard to pull off. And 5 years is a long time, as we can see what did 2020 look like. 5 years is a long time for any kind of relationship like this. So again, it's totally allowable if you want to talk to us after and think you will meet that requirement, then absolutely. Couple other pieces here. All pages require signature by essentially the director, the superintendent. So there's a lot that goes into this. Now, again, it is more than just partnering for services. It's a shared responsibility of the grant entirely, but with one entity being the fiscal agent. So again, if I could just say it again, don't write your grant around the competitive priority submitting jointly points, because we've had that happen in the past, and we either determine that you're not actually submitting jointly, or it just doesn't work. So please just keep that in mind. Any questions on that? Or do I have another slide, Cheryl? I can't remember on that.
I think I'm next. No, that's it. Did you see this one? Did you wait? You cover? I mean, I just left it up for people to read.
Yeah, basically that's just the language that there has to be an active collaboration with the schools and the participating students, including the sharing of relevant data among schools. Essentially, you're in it together for 5 years. And another warning, if I can, it can't change. So in other words, and this would go just for partnering as well, but if the school district were to decide, we don't want to do this anymore, you can't just move to another school district.
They would have to forfeit the grant, correct?
Correct.
If one of the partners, or not partners, but one of the
partnering entities decided they didn't want to continue in year 3, the grant would be forfeited.
Right.
Any questions? That's a lot of stuff there. Okay, it doesn't look like there's anything.
No questions? Okay. I guess we'll move on to application details and requirements. And I'll try to kind of go through these a little slower. So the first kind of area that the application covers is program need and target audience. So make sure when you're writing your grant application that you specifically indicate in your application who your target audience is. It's not good enough to just say, well, all our kids are low income, and so that's who we're going to serve. All areas of the state have kids that have needs. Just make sure you explain that really well and put it into your application. This is the only way the readers will know that you have a genuine need. And be sure to reference that same target audience throughout the whole application, so readers aren't confused as to which targeted audience you're writing the grant for. A simple way to define the needs is usually ask, a few questions, do a needs assessment survey. What is the need of your children? what are the needs of your parents, and what are the contributing factors that are responsible for that need. And again, just to make sure you explain that really well, and your needs assessment shows that, and your surveys explain that really well. They are unique to your kids and community, and again, all kids have needs, but you have to really spell out what sets yours apart, and make sure you include that in the narrative. So that's a really crucial piece in preparing the grant. So I know that was a lot of, this is only my second grant reading. I did the SAC one this past summer. So that was, I know that was a couple of items on some of the applications was, you really need to show what your need is. And, just make sure you give a really good description of what the needs in the community are for your kiddos and parents.
And Cheryl, if I can jump in just really quickly, great job on that. So for those of us that are new to this grant, when we're talking about the need, this is going to be your first scored section. So readers are going to be looking at your assessment, your needs assessment, how relevant's the data. Then beyond that, when you get into your actual narrative, that's when you really need to, stress the need. And a lot of times, and this is probably the third highest scored in the grant. I'd say probably second or third. So really getting that relevant data, and then the narrative, in my opinion, sets the tone for your entire application. So just keep that in mind.
Right, because it's one of the first sections they read, correct, Jimmy?
Absolutely.
Right.
So there's a question, Cheryl and Jimmy. Actually, two questions. One of them kind of the same. Do you have an example of a needs assessment survey? Is there a template?
No, we don't have one, I believe.
Yeah, I don't know that we haven't. We could probably find one, or if there's another, if someone else on here has a good template. I don't know that we have one saved, but we can look into that for you, Tracy.
And then the other question is there a threshold response rate you're looking for in a survey?
Threshold response. Where
Tracy, if you want to unmute yourself and ask that question just to clarify what you're looking for. Let me see if I can help.
Hi, this is Tracy.
Hi, Tracy.
So you send out, say, a survey to 200 parents and 25 parents respond. That's a pretty low response rate.
Sure.
Are you looking for a 50% response rate from parents? Does that seem like so you're looking for, I'm looking for, how broad-based are you looking for this response rate?
Really, I think that's going to depend from program to program, community to community. Just in my experience with doing this, I don't know that the readers have looked at so much as threshold as how relevant the data is, and sort of what I think the relevant data is more what they're looking at. I don't know that, especially in these times, I don't know that you can worry a lot about 25% versus 50 really. But I think it's more the questions, responses, and then just having relevant data on it, if that helps.
Okay. So in terms of the needs assessment, you're looking for, say, a survey of parents and families, but you're also probably looking for maybe underlying data like we see from our test scores or other kinds of
Absolutely.
data that the school collects that we have a need in this and such academic area.
Absolutely.
That is also considered needs assessment. Yes.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. And just the community as well too. And just to add to that too, Jimmy, that even if you do a needs assessment, like you said, I don't know that we necessarily have a set threshold, but at least if you show and explain that you did send them out, and then explain, and then you have your data then to back it up as well. Like I said, it's kind of a combination of things like you said.
Right. Okay. And also needs assessment would be like parents say, we need after school care.
Absolutely.
That kind of thing.
Right.
That's also, it's also kind of the social, family, emotional realm of things, not just strictly academic.
Absolutely. And Tracy, you hit on a good point there, and Cheryl's going to get on with this when we get into the actual putting the program together. Everything should flow in an application, consistency, and we're going to say that word a lot in this training. So once we've established our needs, then when we go into the creation of the program, what's the program going to look like, and the design, readers should see pretty easily, how we've addressed the needs, we've looked at the data. Now here's what our programming is going to look like to meet those needs. So it all kinds of flows together. And I'm getting way ahead of myself. I told Cheryl I wouldn't do that today, but
oh, that's okay. Well, and another thing too is, surveys of the kids too. You have to focus your program also on, what interests the kids as well too, and the parents. Like I think one of the examples was, if you have $10,000 in field trips on your budget, do all those field trips necessarily help meet the needs of the program? You know what I mean? So just a lot of things to consider in that needs assessment. But I think it's a broad picture as a whole, not just one certain area.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Great question. Great questions.
Any other questions on that? No? Okay. So the next part we're going to talk about is collaboration and communication. So often grant applications are completed by seasoned grant writers, which is fine. They tend to do a great job selling the potential program. Just keep in mind, if you do use a grant writer, it cannot be paid with grant funds. In many cases, the grant writers themselves have little to no involvement with the program operation, and it's then turned over to the district or organization, who then might be somewhat unfamiliar with the grant or the requirements. So just make sure if you do hire a grant writer that the entity you're working with is understanding of the requirements of the grant. And the person who then, if you're awarded, takes over the grant, understands how to operate the grant and all the requirements with it. So that's why, again, it's important to really involve all the parties who will be active with the life of the grant: the parents, the students, the community, the school leaders, et cetera, program director, if already involved.
Also, if I can just throw in, if you go back there, Cheryl, I'm sorry. There are companies out there that will write your grant for you. They write very good grants, but just be warned, because this has happened several times, that they'll say, for example, we'll write the grant completely for $5,000. Okay, well, the district or maybe your organization doesn't have that kind of capital up front to spend, so they'll say, we'll write it for you for free, but you have to write our evaluation services in the grant as a purchase service, which is always something like $300,000 or something like that. Once I see that on your budget, it's of course going to get crossed out, and then we've got a whole potential legal matter on our hands. So just be sure, if anyone else is going to be writing your proposal, just make sure you read everything and you understand your role and they understand theirs. Okay, because that's happened more often than once.
Right. Or someone new might come in between the time that the grant is written and approved and implemented, and then they really have no idea what was in the grant in the first place. So
we've had that happen too.
Yeah. So any other questions on that? Comments? Okay, the next slide, we're just going to talk about program operation, just some of the general information, knowledge. You must operate a program a minimum of 4 days and 12 hours per week during non-school hours, and this could be after school, before and after school, evenings, weekends, holidays, summers. Research has proven that brief periods of contact time in after-school programs are not beneficial, that it's crucial that they attend on a regular basis. And just back to that first bullet there, I know this year we had some programs operate during school because virtual school, but again, we are really encouraging you to write this grant as if things were somewhat hopefully back to normal next year, and then we can handle that on a case-by-case basis. So your schedule should meet the needs of both the students and working parents, and it's encouraged to operate the length of the school year in order to accommodate working families. We don't want you to just operate a summer school program. This helps working parents provide a safe environment for their students. And then this is just an example on the applications. A lot of times we'll see this. You'll fill out here the regular school day, and you'll put 12 hours here, but then when you break it down by day, it doesn't add up to 12. So just make sure this only adds up to 10, this is 12. So make sure you get that. Make sure that those are added up correctly and matching when you fill out the application.
Yeah, and what'll happen, especially when we're facilitating the grant reading, is this would flag a question from our reader teams. What we'll tell them is it's likely, just an addition error, but not to take any points away. But what'll happen is once the grants are done, either Cheryl, Cindy, myself, Kim would reach out to the particular program and just, send a very bland email that just says, this site, it didn't add up to 12 hours. Do you intend to serve 12 hours a week? And we get yes, no, whatever. And then usually it's a yes. And so that gets rectified without the program losing points or the application losing points, because we want the grant readers to focus on the overall content. So the needs, how you're going to run the program, the operation, how much it's going to cost, as opposed to worrying about, a couple numbers being off early in the application. So,
Right.
But again, it is really important to make sure you have all your numbers add up right there.
Correct.
And I see we have a couple questions, Cheryl, if we want to see it. Let me see if we can tackle those real quick.
I can't see the chat box, so if you could.
Okay, bear with me really quickly. I think I answered that one. If you do not have employees but have volunteers this time. Yes, that is possible. On the employee question, yes. We operate some school qualified as we. I tell you, for Kathy, we'll talk about that once we get done, if that's okay. So just, yeah, thanks. Okay.
Other questions?
Yeah, we're good, Cheryl.
Okay. The next slide, we're going to talk about program attendance. Attendance must be taken daily in your program and reported monthly. We have a software program that enables you to do that. You'll be asked to record the following, not record. On your application, you'll be asked how many students you plan to enroll, how many will attend 30 plus days, and how many students of the 30 plus days will attend 60 plus days. So we kind of ask you to estimate that. And there's an example, like a snapshot of the application right there that, you may propose to serve 500. You think about 30 days regularly will be 200, and then, of the 500 regular attendees will be 200, and then actual 30 plus days will be 75. So that just kind of gives you an example.
Give me 1 second, Cheryl. I'm asking a
sorry.
question. And just to stress on this particular slide, on the program attendance slide, the kids that attend the program 30 plus days, they're the only kids we can report federally. That's why that's really important. And I know I'm going to get into this later, so I'll just say I'm already in trouble. But when we talk about inflating numbers, and we'll see this when we get to the budget page, but there's a formula for determining cost per child per day. And a lot of times applicants have figured out that the more kids you propose to serve can lower that cost per child per day. That may make it look a little bit better to a grant writer. So don't intentionally inflate, because, and I know we'll get to this, it can cause ramifications in the future. Because, for example, if you, let's just take this example here. Year one, we struggled a little bit. We didn't quite hit that 200 number. Years 2 and 3, we are only serving 30 to 40 kids 30 plus days on a $400,000 budget. At that point, Cheryl and I have to look at reducing your budget, if that makes sense. So I know I got way ahead of myself, and I knew I would do that. So anyway, so I'll let you move on, Cheryl. Sorry.
Okay. And just keep in mind as we kind of go, go ahead, Brad.
Sorry, just a question from the chat. What's the minimum that you can serve for this grant? Is there a minimum number?
In terms of, if I just get clarification on that, in terms of students or for the students?
Students.
I wouldn't say there's a minimum, but obviously when you're putting this application together, it's sort of like if I could compare it to something like a job interview, you're going to want it to look, appealing for readers. So, I don't know that there's a minimum, but a really, really low number would not look as attractive as a reasonable number. But there's no really way to quantify that because all districts and organizations are different. So I know that probably doesn't help a lot, but real quick, I will throw in that you, on the fiscal side, you have the minimum you can ask for is $50,000, which I'm sure we'll get to at some point, but that was a good place to drop that in.
And just keep in mind as we kind of go through these attendance slides, if COVID is still an issue in the fall, when the grant starts and you're having issues with attendance, just address it with your supervisor if you get awarded. But again, we should plan on writing the grant as if things are back to normal. So just keep that in mind as we go through the next couple slides. Because like Jimmy said, grantees, he talked about inflating your attendance numbers. Grantees risk reduction in funds or placed in higher risk for not meeting a certain percentage of attendance. So that's where, if you inflate your numbers, that could come back to get you, because then you could be placed in the high risk category because you're not meeting the a percentage of those attendance numbers that you stated you would probably meet. So, and just FYI, the U.S. Department of Ed has revised the GEPRA measures, which is the federal reporting. So additional data collection and or data entry might be required as a result. We haven't received all of the information on that yet, so we will be sharing that information as we receive it. Any other questions on the attendance or comments, Jimmy?
Let me see. Nope. I think, yep, Jocelyn, thank you for that. And nope, we're good right now.
Okay.
Linking the after school program with the regular school day. As you can see here, just by our bullets, really important. Grant readers are going to be looking for this, and it doesn't matter if you're a CBO and you're partnering with a school district, or you're just a school district grant. They're going to want to see ongoing communication, emails, case conferencing, just making sure that what's going on in the regular day with students is getting addressed in the after school program, if that makes sense. And I'll just let everyone look at this, but there will be, we have a collaboration academic alignment assurance, and this is for non-school applicants. And yeah, I'll let you read through that, but essentially the sharing of relevant data amongst schools and agencies. We just want to make sure that that's there, because if you're not reporting the data, then we'll have a problem. So a lot of this has been done just to make it easier on facilitating the partnerships between, with our non-school providers. So any questions on any of that?
And Jimmy, just this next slide, I changed it, that the superintendent really we need to make sure those signatures are there, because there is a statement of assurance that has to be completed every year. So.
Correct. Okie dokie. Yeah, absolutely. Statement of assurances. And I think we also put in that new piece. But yeah, just making sure all those signatures are there. I know we had a question earlier, about the entity isn't partnered with the school yet, but will be. It's really important to get all these pieces signed, obviously update yearly. All this does is protect the organization, the school district. Most importantly, it impacts the kids and families you're serving.
Right. Because again, the LEA has to provide that. They have to understand that they have to provide that data to you. It's a requirement of the grant. So.
Absolutely. Transportation. And this is also part of the law. Safe daily transportation is an allowable expense as both students leave their program in the evening as well as educational field trips. Now, transportation is allowed. It's not mandatory that it's an expense, but if you look down at that last bullet, probably the most important piece, you must address how students participating in the program will travel safely to and from, and now I can't read it because a question popped up, but I think we can all read that. Essentially, transportation can't be a barrier, okay, to students attending the program. So you can't purchase a bus, but the grant may be allowed. The grant can pay for the driver, the cost of fuel, etc. Just make sure we're maintaining transportation logs, which details days, number of students, driver hours, etc. All that good stuff. One other piece, I'm gonna look at the chat box real quick because it looks like we got a question. Grants toward our after school programs for the fall instead of right now. We may need to address that once we're done, if that's okay. And yeah, I think that'd be a good one to address once we're done, if that's all right. Thank you. Really quick, one thing that we haven't talked about, which is important in any sort of grant, is certain words. So if in the grant application we say you must do something, that means you must do it. There's no back and forth. It must be done. Must or shall, those two words, if it's in there, you must meet those standards. Could, should is highly encouraged, but not an absolute. So just keep those things in mind. I think we might have missed that slide, Cheryl, at some point. But okay, moving on to family engagement. Build relationships, communicating with families, creates welcoming environment, invite parents to play a role in the program, decision-making or lead activities. You know, the parent engagement, something our programs have gotten a lot better about, but have struggled in the past just because they may offer something, but the attendance is really weak. Our programs have gotten a lot better about offering, you know, it's always good to survey parents. And I realize, you know, at times it feels like we're getting surveyed to death, but there have been a lot of really unique activities programs have been doing. One that I always think back to is social media class. They got a lot of parents, a lot of family members got involved with that. So just coming up with something unique that will really appeal to the adult family members, that goes a long way on your application. So, but it's not just the application, it's actually executing it in real time. So just try to think of unique things. I know tax preparation has been one we've heard a lot about lately. So, you know, again, as part of the law, you will have to write to it. So the more unique aspects you can come up with for programming, the better. Again, survey. I thought I saw a question pop up, but I don't know that.
Any questions on family engagement? And feel free to unmute too, if that's easier than putting it in the chat box.
Absolutely. You know, usually when we do this the old fashioned way, you can just raise your hand and we can get to your question, but it's a little more difficult when you're actually trying to present and look at a chat box. So next up, in partnerships, and this is a scored area, partnerships are absolutely vital to the long-term viability of your program. And with the grant, I'll let you read the various bullets, but we're going to ask for a couple of things with the applications. We're going to ask for letters of commitment. It's really important in those letters of commitment that those sort of bolded areas there, the who will do what, when, where, to what ends, and what is anticipated results, and if there's any monetary cost. Now, along with letters of commitment, we're also going to ask you for essentially partnership letters, okay? Now, and I don't know if we get into it on the next slide, Cheryl, because again, I don't want to get ahead of myself. But really try to get your partners to write out specific letters, okay? One little bit of controversy we have every year is that if you're paying a partner for something, does that constitute a purchase service? And the answer to that is it really depends. I would advise you not to, if you're paying a partner, not to list them as a partner unless they are providing a service at a highly discounted rate. I'm just going to give you an example because it's all I can think of off the top of my head. If you're having math science come in, you know, a couple of times a month, that's great. If you're paying them, it's going to be a purchase service. But let's say their service normally runs $10,000. They're giving it to you for $1,000. That's a pretty good deal. So, but be really specific. Have them write out very specifically, and even that may even go into your narrative in your main section of the grant. Make sure it's clearly spelled out, because remember, our readers don't know anything about your area, your kids, your program. So if I'm a reader and I see, oh, hey, this is a great deal, yes, that would then be a partnership. But, you know, in my experience, if it looks like it may not meet, don't include them as a partner. They just be a purchase service. Any questions on anything? that I went through. I'm kind of getting out in the weeds a little bit with more.
You want to talk about the in-kind donations or anything?
Sure. And again,
Some other sources of partnerships that aren't necessarily.
right. So if you have volunteers, I know someone brought up a volunteer earlier. That can also look really nice on an application. You have a lot of volunteers. And then if you look, the data there, the 2019 hourly value was $24.65. National was $27.20. So that can also look on an application. Keep in mind, there's no match of any kind for this grant, but that would look nice maybe in the sustainability portion of the grant. So, but any other partnership questions? Oh, with your own. And yeah, so one question that's come up on the last several readings is, let's just say you're a school district and you list the actual school district as a partner. That doesn't look really good on an application because with all the assurances that are being signed, it's essentially implied. So we're going to want to look at other sources of partnerships, 4-H, Department of Conservation, police departments, things of that nature is what'll look a lot better. And again, that second bullet, it's a federal requirement that grant and student data must be reported. Okay. So in other words, don't partner with yourself because again, the readers won't like it and you'll get scored down. It's like the third bullet says, it is vital that programs are able to receive the data to meet reporting requirements. Note a signed agreement of data sharing may be included in the application. And I think it will be actually. Let me see.
Any other questions on partnerships? Is there more in there, Jimmy?
Yeah, there's another question on the A+ students. Yeah, you can absolutely use them. I mean, obviously you can't pay them, but that I think that would look good on application. I don't know that I would list them as partners though, if that makes sense, Jocelyn.
More of like an in-kind, like of time.
Okay, so she's saying we count them and then we hire them hopefully when they graduate. Great, Casey. Good deal.
Any other questions on partnerships? Okay, I'll take over. I just wanted to touch real quickly on licensure. So programs may require a license. No program may operate if they are required to be licensed until licensure is received. Essentially, it's the responsibility of each applicant. So if you're thinking of applying, I would inquire with Department of Health and Senior Services now to see if you will need to be required to be licensed. Awarded funds are contingent upon determination. And we realize there may be some delays with licensing right now. So if you did apply and you were awarded the grant and you had applied for your license, but still hadn't received it, as long as you can show that you're working towards it, we're fine with that. You just need to let us know ahead of time. So, and Jimmy, I'm sure you probably have some information to add on licensing.
Absolutely. It gets a little trickier with the 21st Century Grant because we all know with the SAC grant, you have to, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. But yeah, definitely look in with Department of Health and Senior Services. And if you are awarded, as long as you're making good faith effort to get the process completed, like Cheryl said, there will be delays. Just make sure you stay, in touch with not only them, but us as well, letting us know where you are in the process. And other confusion is sometimes a school district may be the applicant or of the grant, but they may contract out with a CBO. Just because it's taking place in the school district doesn't mean that there doesn't need to be a license. So because you've got an outside entity running the grant, and we've run into that in the past. So just make sure you do your due diligence prior to applying so we don't get into the second year and find out, oops.
Right. That's the part I was thinking about, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Sometimes the school might be exempt, but then you run a separate program and you need to be exempt. So.
Absolutely. Any questions? Let's see if we got anything in the chat box. How are we doing on time, Cheryl?
It is 5 minutes till 10.
Okay, in case you just made a note that she's hearing there's up to a 6-month delay to get licensed, which we will absolutely work with you guys on that. We will be more than flexible. Again, just make sure you stay in touch with us.
Okay, Jimmy, I'm sorry. I think I took that slide from you.
That's okay. Yeah, vice versa.
You have one.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Nita. Yes, actually, I believe so, but I would definitely check with them, but I would think so. But I'm not
Okay, thank
expert on all things licensing, so. Okie doke, moving on. Facility site location. Must assure the program will take place in a safe and easily accessible facility. If an off-campus program site is proposed, the program location must at least be available and accessible as it would be if it were located at a school site. And I think this kind of plays into the licensing piece as well. There must be a clearly defined plan of communication between the alternate site and the schools, including the alignment of the academic assistance component. And of course, safe transportation between the school and the alternate site must be provided.
Right. And we had this happen, Jimmy, a little bit this year. There were some situations where schools had to move their site because the school was open and they had to operate. We understand that could happen still technically next year. Again, write your grant as if it doesn't, and then adjust and keep us posted as needed.
Absolutely.
But that's something, case by case basis. As far as writing your grant, just write it, as I said, as if things were back to normal. So,
and to answer Gabrielle's question really quickly, it maybe that Health and Senior Services makes the actual determination on that. If they say you need to be licensed, then you need to be licensed. I don't actually say that. They make that determination. So if they say, yes, you do, then you need to start going through the process of getting that done, even though we understand there's going to be delays.
Right. And that's why we say to kind of, if you anticipate, that you are going to apply for the grant, to start looking into that now and get kind of a jump start on, as opposed to waiting until you get awarded. So next slide, we're just going to talk about, if there's no other questions. Jimmy, you don't see any in the chat?
I don't see anything, no.
Okay. Private school consultation or non-public consultation. So a public school or other public or private organizations that are awarded must provide equitable services to private school students and their families if the students are part of the area served by the 21st Century Grant. So this includes having timely and meaningful consultation with the private school during the design and implementation. It can't be done after the fact. I think that's a big part that I think a lot of people miss. If you have a program and you've already thought about it, and then you go to the non-public and say, or the private school and say, well, this is what our program is. That's not really consultation. You really should be consulting with them to see what their needs are as well, and see if that can be incorporated into your program. So it must occur before any program decisions are made and not after the fact, like I just kind of stated. The goal is to reach an agreement between the private school and the LEA. And it should be done at the very minimum 2 times a year. It should be ongoing throughout the school year. And I know a lot of times, I think part of our monitoring, we ask for documentation that you've done this consultation. So just make sure, I would recommend doing some type of email. I don't know that we have a lot of non-publics or private schools that participate in the 21st Century Grants, but we still require that consultation be done. A lot of times, like I said, I would recommend emailing the non-public or private school. At least then you can show and verify that you made the effort to do it, even if you don't receive a response. At least you can show that you did that. If you, for some reason, you have a non-public or private school that has opted out of federal programs, then you wouldn't have to worry about them consulting with them. So, any other questions on that, or Jimmy?
It's fairly rare that
Right.
private, it's pretty rare, and it's also pretty rare that you hear back from them. But again, reaching out, establishing that paper trail of sending an email, even if you don't get anything back, you're at least trying, and that's what we'll want to see on the front end for this application.
Right. The next section we're going to talk about is program income and fees. So parent participation fees can be charged, but they are considered income based on guidance from the U.S. Department of Education. So just some guidance there. You need to spend all the program income collected within the 5 years of programming. Fees must be used only for purposes and under the conditions of the awarded grant. Fees must be coded to separate account to determine separation of federal funds from fees collected. And you also must offer a sliding scale of fees and scholarships for those who cannot afford to participate. These are all things we ask for during our monitoring. And I think we talk in the next slide too, you know, you absolutely cannot hold a participation from a student if they're not able to pay. So, but I think we get into that a little bit later. So, I mean, anything to add to the program?
And just for purposes of putting the application together, and you can absolutely charge fees. There's nothing wrong with that. Make sure you're really, really clear on sliding scale. Make sure you're really clear that, you know, kids who can't afford to attend the program won't be held out just because they can't pay, because I can tell you our readers will not like that at all. So, which I think that would go without saying, but just for purposes or tips of writing it, make sure you're really, really clear on the sliding scale.
Right.
Jimmy and Cheryl had a question.
Okay.
Kind of going back to the private school. Are you required to provide transportation from the private school to your site if they want to participate?
If you want to, you can. And I know this isn't going to, I'll answer the question as best I can. You're required to consult with them, but you don't have to completely, you know, overhaul your program just to take care of them.
Right. And I would think as if you are awarded the grant, you would be the final determination on that decision. You know, they could consult with them and they could request that, but I think ultimately you would be the ultimate decision on that.
Yeah. I think that would stay local. It's sort of like hiring staff, you know, as long as they meet your standards, we tend to stay out of that. I think that'd be more of a local decision.
Right.
A great question.
Yep.
Let me look real quick. Does the grant require fees to be charged? No, the grant does not require fees to be charged. And that's really a great question, Jocelyn. And I hope I'm not going over the top here, Cheryl. If you're going to charge fees, start charging from year one. Okay. If do it,
yep.
okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just trying to answer a question.
No, go ahead.
So here's, and I don't know if we mentioned it in the program fees part, but yes, you can charge fees, and yes, they can be used for sustainability during years 4 and 5 when we have diminished funds. One thing, and I don't know if we got into this back on the fees page, but all fees collected or all income coming into the program has to be spent on something program appropriate by the end of the 5th year. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Let's head back to where were we at sustainability?
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yep. Jimmy, there's one more question about, does it have to be a sliding scale?
Yes.
Yes.
So sustainability, which is another scored part of the grant. It's important when building your sustainability plan to think in well, it's not really year 6 anymore. I guess it should be 5. We need to change, make a note. We need to change that, Cheryl. And the reason that sentence is in there is years and years ago. Right now, this is an application for cohort 12. Back when it was cohort 4, the Fed's big push was all about sustainability. That's all they thought about. That's all they wanted us talking about in their grant. And that sort of changed with the economy. So, but here's, we're going to talk about the fees a little bit more. If you're considering charging a fee, like I said, it's important to do it at the beginning of your program rather than starting at the end, as parents will be less likely to pay for a service that was free at one time. It is important to note that after 21st century funding ends, you cannot reapply to continue the same program. You must enhance or expand. So what that's talking about is you have your 5-year program. Your 5-year program ends, and I know there's a lot of people on this particular training that's going to be a part of. So when you're writing that next application, be very, very clear that yes, the last 5 years we did these things and we did them at a high level. We are going to expand or enhance by doing what we're going to do. So just make sure you're really, really clear with that. Because if not, it becomes it looks a little bit more like supplanting rather than sustaining. So
This might be a good time, Jimmy, to stop and ask if we have any questions or if we need to go back to anything, because it's 5 after 10 and before we get into
okay.
new things.
I'm just looking at some of the I don't know Amy's question. I don't know you'd need data entry for a 40 hours a week, but, and again, you may, but I don't know that you would need that. And they have to be sliding scale, right? Correct. For Jade. Any other questions before we take are we taking a break now, Cheryl? Or are we?
Yeah, we can before we get into the next things, or we can do.
Where are we at next?
Might be a good place to kind of make a break.
Yeah, so we're just going to take a quick, let's say, what time is it?
5 after, maybe like 10:20.
Yeah, we'll come back at 10:20. I'll try to look at the next. Yeah, so why don't we take a quick break, and if you have questions, throw them up and we'll try to answer them when we get back, okay? Can you wait? Yes, Casey, that wouldn't necessarily be something. I mean, you could talk towards that in the application if it looks good. But if it's going to adapt, then yeah, you bring that up in the continuation report, which a continuation report is what you'll get into after you score high enough to get the grant. So we don't need to worry about that a lot now, but so yeah, any other questions? Got one more, let's see. Can you partner with more than one LEA for this grant? So that's a great question.
I think we get into that a little bit later.
Yeah, why don't we hold that for the end if you don't mind, okay? Because that might get a little technical and sometimes the technical ones take a while. Thank you. All right, let's move on into program goals, Cheryl.
All right. Brad, we're good to go. Just want to make sure before we get started again.
I think so, yeah. And thank you, Lisa, for reminding me to hit record.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Should have done that, Brad. Sorry. Thanks for doing
No, we're good. We're good.
Just kind of want to talk real quick about program goals. This kind of goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, what the purpose kind of the grant is. So there's 3 goals that need to be implemented with the grant. Goal number 1 is to support or increase student achievement and sense of competence in the areas of reading, communication arts, mathematics, and science. Goal number 2 is to develop and maintain a quality program that includes a safe and supportive environment, positive interactions, and meaningful opportunities for engagement. And then goal number 3 is to enhance youth college and career readiness skills and behaviors, including positive school behaviors, personal and social skills. So really, when you think about designing your plan, you should keep those goals in mind, and realize that your plan should be unique to your students, your parents, your community, and make sure you establish what sets it apart from other programs. You'll need to include the proposed academic opportunities, and all those goals will need to be written out in your proposal. And you have to be able to demonstrate that those activities, programs, and services are meeting meeting those needs of the students and the families to help progress towards those goals. So, any questions on that?
And just to jump in here really quickly, you know, Cheryl talked about addressing the need earlier. So now what we're into is the program design based upon that need. So you've heard us say a lot of things. You've heard the broad array, okay? Establishing communication. All that'll take place in your program design, which is, along with budget, one of the highest scored areas, okay? So really being clear about the services you're going to provide to your students and family, again, based on that need that you already identified. And let's see, I don't know if this is we've got a long question. Let me see if I can get through it really quickly. Okay. Okay, Kathy, we may try to tackle that one at the end. It's pretty long. So if you can hang on till the end, or if you want to email me after the fact, we can certainly get to that. Okay. It's pretty wordy. See, I got one more. Okay. She said yes. So keep rolling, Cheryl.
I
Oh,
think this is your,
oh boy. It's everyone's favorite part, the budget. And for whatever wonderful reason, I get to talk to you about that. So before we actually get into the budget, like I just said, Cheryl talked about establishing your need. Okay, once you've done that, what are we going to do about that in our program design to address the need? Okay, then we get into how much is this all going to cost? Okay, so next slide, Cheryl.
oh, sorry. Mouse wasn't working.
Okay, so your budget should be a direct reflection on your program's financial needs. So everything we've been talking about up until now, what's it going to cost? And the second bullet's really important. We train our readers to evaluate budgets that are reasonable and justifiable and tied to the scope of your program and appropriate for the size of the program and the number of students served. Please be realistic. Don't ask for the max just because you can. If you truly need, do you truly need that much for your program? Can you maintain that much when the grant ends, which that really doesn't matter. But please be realistic. It's obviously, you know, we're in always unstable financial times, but literally, again, you must ask for at least $50,000. Anything less than that, we can't fund. Okay. So be thinking about the need, think about your design. What are we going to need for salaries? What are we going to need for supplies, equipment, professional development? What are we going to need for all of that? And put it to paper. Okay. Next one, Cheryl. Whoops. There we go. Explain your purchases clearly so readers know what the item is and how it relates to your program. Don't make them guess or assume, as we train them not to. Okay. Most, but not all unallowable requests come in the equipment and supplies category. And I don't know if we want to show that now, Cheryl, the,
I can show it now and later.
yeah, actually go back up a slide though. Oh wait, go down a slide. I'm sorry.
Hang on.
Or just do it however you need to do it.
Okay.
And Cheryl's going to post up for us our spending guidelines, which can be found on the DESE Afterschool portal. And I don't know if we can we see the whole thing, Cheryl? Okay, and Brad just put a link to it. So everything on this list has been requested at one point or another, whether on an application, a budget amendment, or continuation report, all of this. So obviously, if it's on the unacceptable side, again, we're going to treat this grant application like, you know, a job interview or a resume. Do not put anything on on your budget or have it be part of your program. If it's unallowable, it's completely inappropriate, then no. Even if it's questionable, I would highly recommend not putting it on your competitive application. And I'll explain to you why. Let's just take, for example, let me look around at something here. Go up a little bit, Cheryl. Let's just say smart boards, just for example. Okay. Smart, and I know technology is shrinking, but smart boards was a real problem years ago. You're legitimately wanting to purchase some smart boards with your 21st Century Grant. Don't put it on your competitively scored application. Okay. Just because you never want the readers thinking, well, that's questionable, because if they ask us, we'll say, well, that's questionable. Did they tie it into their program design? Does it meet their needs? So if you still want to purchase that, once you score high enough to get the grant, you can then check with Cheryl or myself to see if, hey, here's our situation. We think these would work. There may be a cost share involved. Then you may be able to get them. If it's on your application, it's already questionable now. So I just avoid putting anything, especially on the unacceptable side, but anything even on the questionable side on your competitively scored application. Okay. That's just the grant writer in me. Okay. You never want any questions, any flags from the readers. So I think we might have a question. Let me see. No.
Jimmy, I have just a quick question on that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I know field trips are on the questionable list. So I just want to make sure people understand you are able to put field trips in, because I just want to make sure, and I apologize, everyone. I just started this position about a year ago. So they can put field trips, but you have to really, really show how they're tied to the academic component. how they're going to meet the needs of your program in reaching those goals that we just talked about. But say, for instance, they leave the field trips out because it's questionable, but then they come back after they're awarded and say, well, we didn't put it in there, but we're going to go on these field trips.
Sure. No, absolutely right. But again, it's just the grant writer in me, but Cheryl's right. If you are going to put something on the questionable side, make sure you very clearly explain how it's tied back to curriculum, how it's going to meet the needs, how it's going to address the design. Absolutely right.
Okay. Just making sure. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Nope. That was pretty much it, unless we have questions. So if we could go back to the slideshow.
Good.
Okay, so Gabrielle had a question. Can you clarify the smart board scenario again? Okay, so, and again, I'm talking strictly as a grant writing sort of strategist here. Okay. Can we add the lesson plan for the appeals? To Lisa, yes. Just make sure you don't go over the allotted amount of, writing space, however many pages. But yes, if you're going to put those in, make sure it's very, very clearly defined. Okay. And have support for that. And no, I'm not saying you should not include technology needs. But again, if you are going to, on that questionable side, make sure you have plenty of support for the purchases, if that makes sense. So no, I'm not telling you not to include technology. Please don't take it that way.
I think Jimmy was kind of just trying to say, if you do put something in from that questionable list, just make sure you explain it really well, how it ties into your goals and how it fits into your needs. And I think he's not saying don't include it necessarily, but just make sure you explain it really well so the reader understands that, oh, this is a questionable item, but they've really explained well how they're going to tie that into meet their program needs and meet their program goals.
Absolutely. Awesome. And I'll try to stay out of the weeds on that. So kind of like what we were just talking about. Important to show how program will coordinate with the federal, state, and local programs with the most effective use of public resources, and demonstrate how you will leverage existing school resources. So does the school provide space, janitorial? And will you be providing a snack through DESE, school foods, or CACFP? Okay, next one, Cheryl. Okay, when you craft your budget, think of all 5 years as opposed to the initial year. Now, I'll tell you, just for the grant reading purpose, your initial year is going to be the year scrutinized the most in terms of breakdown. But we will look at obviously the readers will look at the full 5 years. But again, they're going to stress that first year in the budget narrative. So budgets will diminish by 20% in year 4, 40% in year 5. DESE will determine this by taking the awarded amounts from the first 3 or 4 years, getting an average and diminishing by 20 and 40%. One of the things, and Cheryl and I debated this week, that it's not such a problem anymore, and this will only matter if you get the grant, but in years 4 and 5, we will actually send you out what your amount will be. And we've had some situations in the past where, and Cheryl, can you bring up the 5-year budget, please? Yep. And again, I'm not trying to confuse anyone here, but if you are successful in getting this grant, you'll thank me in years 4 and 5 if this doesn't happen to you. So this is a really, really clean, well done budget. You can see there in the yellow, DESE will base the final diminishing on calculations on our little calculator we have. So if you look at year 4 there, okay, so in year 4, they're asking for a grand total of, I can't really read it, but it looks like 398,478.
Yep.
Okay. So regardless of whether they've applied the 20% to that or not, we'll actually do that. So let's just say, for the case of argument, that number is their diminished fund. So as we see a lot with after school programs, you have directors that move on, someone new comes in. So your new person comes in and you're told, hey, you've got to do this continuation report, come up with a budget. So that person, without knowing what their number could be, sets up a budget for $250,000. Once they've done that, I can't add any money to it when I get it. So we can't add any money to anything. We can only subtract. So their budget should have been a grand total of 398,478, if I'm reading that right.
Right.
But instead they submitted not knowing all their figures to add up to $250,000. Well, now, they've just lost all of that they could have received. So, and that happens a lot. So it's not going to really help you in as far as grant writing mastery, but this is just a real clean budget if you look at everything. And if you look over to the, well, I guess to my right, you'll see how they break things down, Cheryl, if you just want to scroll down there a little bit. And so at the bottom of the page on the left, you'll see cost per child. You want that number to be as low as you can get it. Now, again, don't inflate your enrollment numbers, because inflating enrollment numbers will shrink that number. Just be realistic with your budget. And I don't know if you can go down any.
Do you want me to go back to the presentation?
Yeah, we had a real quick question. What is a reasonable salary for a full-time administrator for the program for a 12-month program? I mean, that's really a local decision more so than it is ours. I mean, you can see on there what this particular program had their coordinator making. Again, reasonable is a word we like to use a lot. Well, go ahead.
I think it depends too. I mean, this program coordinator, if you look at her salary, she's only working 22 hours a week. You know what I mean? Depending on the size of your program, you may have a coordinator that runs a bigger program and she may require more hours. You know what I mean? So, and I do believe there, Jimmy, there's more guidance about that in the application itself. A little bit more.
And to answer Lisa's question, she asked, in this budget example, years 2 and 3 are more than this one. Is this common? Yes and no, honestly. And right. Yes, Judy, thank you for catching that. This was just an example. So Judy noted that there's no depreciation in years 4 and 5. Yeah, don't worry, Judy, we'll handle that for you.
Well, and just to clarify that too, I mean, you wouldn't put it on your application, correct? We will diminish those funds for you and let you know your amount. So you will go ahead and budget what you believe you'll need, correct, Jimmy?
Yes.
And diminish your funds for you. We don't want you to diminish your funds first, and then, and then we further diminish those funds.
If that makes sense. But again, year 1 is going to be scrutinized the most. That's where you're going to lay out your itemized costs as well as your budget narrative. So make sure everything is allowable. And I'm just going to use an example here. Cheryl, if you can scroll down and see if they have any equipment on here. Yep, hold on. Chromebooks, zSpace computers. Okay, just make sure any sort of technology, because that's usually, I'll be honest with you, what gets picked at the most. Just make sure it's justified in your program design. Okay, that we talked about what we're going to use the Chromebooks for. We've talked about what we're going to use the zSpace computers for, and that there was a need for it. So again, consistency, tying it all together. That's what the readers want to see.
Right.
Okay, so we can probably take that down for now because I'm not sure where we left off on the slide.
Hang on, let me get you to the next one.
I think we can move on to the next one. Yep, okay, we talked about that. And again, consistency, be consistent, okay? That is one thing that I hear from the readers the most. So we've assessed our need, we know what the kids, we know what their family members need. We've designed our program around that. We want to make sure that the cost for it lines up.
Right.
Budget perceptions. And I think we've already talked about this a little bit. Breaking your budget down on this level, cost per child, helps the readers determine if total amount requested matches the number of proposed students to serve. Again, do not inflate. There could and there has been ramifications in the past, simply because, again, if you base your budget on serving 200 kids 30 plus days, and year 3 we're serving 40, obviously that's not a good use of federal funds. So we will have to adjust your budget for you, or work with coaching you to get more kids to attend the programs. And I think we already showed the sample of that, Cheryl. Okay, so typically what you want versus what you need. Years 1 and 2, normal expenses, obviously salaries, benefits, PD, any major program related equipment. is what you're going to want to see there in years 1 and 2. Year 3, dollars should primarily be used for maintaining salaries, benefits, replenishing any supplies, and meeting grant requirements. Any equipment that needs repaired should be taken care of here. In years 4 and 5, your diminished funding years, you're primarily looking on maintaining your salaries and meeting your grant deliverables. So just to sum that up quickly, if you're going to buy, easily pilfered walkable supplies, Chromebooks, etc., or anything else along those lines, it's years 1 and 2 that you want to do that. And again, I'm not trying to scare anyone from putting any technology on their application. But again, if it's going to be on there, make sure it's very, very clearly explained. Okay.
Does anyone want me to pull that budget back up to take another look at it, or?
Yeah, sure. Let me see where I'm at.
And any other questions on the actual budget piece? And again, these are just examples. So you can unmute if that's easier than trying to type it in.
I have a question. Thank you for the unmute option. This is Jade,
Hi, Jade.
From St. Louis. Hi, Jimmy. I was wondering if you all have any resources that show average cost per child for various programs. There's a number of grant opportunities who always want to know cost per child for a program. And
Sure.
I feel like I don't know any sort of range of what funded programs have been funded at, you know?
Yeah, I don't know that we collect. I mean, obviously we collect it because on every one of our competitive grants, it gets listed. I don't know that we have ever housed that anywhere, honestly. But again, it all comes down to number proposed to serve and how that meshes with the total amount of funding. So I don't know that we collect that. I'm sure there's someone somewhere that does, honestly.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not trying to scare you. But yeah, I don't know that we, again, I'm just trying to give you some best practices on how to make your application look good.
Oh, I totally hear you. It's a question I've had from various proposal stances. So if anyone on the call knows of a resource, if you could pop it in the chat box, that would be awesome.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, you guys.
Great question. And will this budget example be sent along with the slide decks? Brad, I'm not sure. I don't even know what slide decks are. So,
Yeah, so that would be,
It's posted to the later.
yeah, so that would be a question for you guys. We'll post, DESE's going to post the slide deck on the website, and then Gabrielle just wanted to know if the sample will be in there with it.
Sure, I can email it to you, Brad. Will you be able to post it if I email it to you?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I can send you this and then the spending guidelines as well.
Okay.
awesome. And I think, Cheryl, I'm about the last part of the budget section actually was talking about the spending guidelines. And I think I've taken care of talking about that.
Yep. Does anyone have any other questions on the spending guidelines? Or want me to pull that back up?
Just remember, be consistent and I know I've said that 100 times. I'm going to say it 100 more. Okay. So we've stated our need for our kids and our families. We've designed our programs to meet that, make sure our budget reflects that.
Right. Just make sure it all ties together.
Absolutely. I'm not seeing any questions, Cheryl.
Okay.
So it looks like we can move into submission.
Okay, great. You guys are doing great. And like I said, if we move on from something and you think of a question, just put it in the chat box so we can get it at the end. So I want to talk about just the way to submit the application. This is a little bit different than in years past due to this current situation. We will not be accepting any in-person drop-off of applications this year. We are highly encouraging you and preferring you to email them if possible to the website listed there. It just helps us easier. You know, we aren't sure at this time if our grant reading will be in person or virtual, and it makes it a lot easier to share the grants if we can email them.
Sorry to interrupt, but we are seeing the Word document.
Yep, I was just going to say, you want to switch back to the slides. Thanks, Jade.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's the budget's up. There we go.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you, Jade. So this will help ensure the due date is met for our applications. It'll help eliminate hopefully bulky mailing costs. And then just make sure when you're doing it, you're planning ahead. So take, for example, you try to email the file and it might be too large. The application is pretty large. So if you go to send it via email and you're not sending it, or you're having technology problems, make sure you allow yourself enough time that if you have to mail it, that you get it mailed in time, because it will still be due regardless on the due date, which will be listed in the application. I believe there's a date and time that it has to be received by. I think I get into this in the next slide too, but just make sure when you do send the application, especially if it's via email or via mail, you don't need to include the guidance section. We already have that section. So just make sure your application is strictly just the application portion, not the guidance section. Make sure you keep a copy of the email if you send it that way. If you do send by mail, make sure you send it with a tracking number and keep documentation of when you sent that as well. So,
okay, so Cheryl, real quick, we've got several questions.
Okay.
Okay, we flip back to the sides. Fielding listed, and you can just type, what were you needing listed?
Say that again.
Well, okay, we'll move on to the next one. Can it be emailed in sections?
Yes, it can. Just make sure you have all the pages. I mean, I would check and double check to make sure, because I'll get into this later, but if we're missing something, we can't add anything to your application. It would have to be completely resubmitted. And we kind of talk about that on the next slide. You can send it in sections. Yes, just make sure, like I said, you check and recheck to make sure that you're not missing any pages if you do it that way.
Okay, so I've got a couple more. Where do we get access to the grant? So what'll happen is it'll go out in the DESE mailbag. We'll email it out. I'm sure the Afterschool Network will email it out, just letting everyone know that the grant is now competitive, and that you will find that on our website along with frequently asked questions. Now, if you go there now, you'll see the last one. And I don't know if we get into this later, Cheryl, so sorry if I ruin it. There won't be, in my opinion, a lot of major changes. The scored section should still be about the same. Now, there may be, some little different information about the law and things like that, but your scored sections should be pretty close to the same. Like our competitive priority, we haven't established that yet, but as far as your scored sections, that should all be the same. So yes, it will actually be on our website, and I'm quite sure everyone on here will get notice about it. This is a direct message. Is there a scoring rubric? Yes, there is a scoring rubric. We don't really advertise that ahead of time, but I can tell you this: the scoring rubric directly reflects the grant. Okay, so there's nothing new in that. If it's, I'm just going to say, I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head. Basically, everything we're telling you now and everything the grant tells you will be reflected on the rubric.
Right.
And I'm trying to think. I did get a question on the budget example. Salaries are reflected as the same for all 5 years. Is it allowable to build in cost of living increases? Yes, it is, as long as they're reasonable. So yeah.
And Jimmy, there was one more question about to prevent a large upload delay, can they share via Google Docs?
Unfortunately not. DESE does not allow us to do that. So
yeah, it's a security issue with DESE and incoming mail. That was actually on my next slide.
Okay. But okay, I think we're clear, Cheryl.
Okay. So just to reiterate, we cannot add items to the applications that are received, whether they're sent via email or mail. So if you submit it and then you go back and look at it and be like, oh my gosh, I forgot a page, you'll have to resubmit the whole entire thing, not just a section. And same if you mail it in. If there's any adjustment to the application, you have to replace the entire application. You have to let us know that that's the one you want us to use for scoring purposes. And again, that's whether it's emailed or mailed to us.
Real quick question, Cheryl, and I can answer this pretty quickly. So program description and budget are the highest sections for scoring. Yes, that would be accurate. So, in what we've been going through, the program design, which, encompasses quite a few sections, I'd say yes, the budget, and then after those two, probably need for program.
Right.
Okay.
Just another few details. Applications should be in the PDF format, not locked from editing. Not that we're going to edit it by any means, but sometimes it just makes it easier for us to read it. And then again, we won't accept any Google documents. DESE will not allow us to do that. And again, just don't submit the guidance portion with the application, because that'll add another 50 pages to your application. So we only need the actual application portion. So any other questions on how you submit? And again, that due date and time will be in the actual application. And I just want to add another note, Jimmy. I was thinking of this when you were talking earlier. The old application is on our website still, and you can absolutely use that for reference. Just make sure when you actually submit that you use the new application, because there may be some minor changes. I don't, like Jimmy said, I don't foresee any major changes, but there may be some minor changes. So just make sure if you use it for a template, you use the one that's posted when we open the new grant to actually submit it. So. Okay, so just some common mistakes when turning in the application. It's not turned in on time. This results in an automatic disqualification, and no exceptions to this, whether it's mailed or emailed. So that's why we really stress to give yourself plenty of time and plan ahead. If the application is out of order, if there are incomplete sections, I think from what I understand, we train our readers to not look around in the grant and try to piece things together. That's, your responsibility to get that in the order that it's supposed to be in. There's a lot of grants usually with this application, so we need to make sure we're not having our readers go through the grant and trying to figure out where everything is. Make sure you have all the attachments. Make sure when you're doing your budget, you double check and triple check and probably have someone else check. We typically get a lot of addition errors on those budgets that are broken down. It just makes it very time consuming, and just make sure it all adds up. Another common mistake is not getting the signatures of the superintendent and the use of acronyms a lot. I know at DESE here too, we like to use acronyms. Everyone likes to use acronyms. Just make sure that, I would say, you limit your use of those, that, you have to think of this as a reader that knows nothing about your program, nothing about your area, and they're coming in as a fresh look, and, just make sure you explain that to the reader, and then it's clear to the reader. Like I said, it says these mistakes can make a reader wonder if you can't follow directions on this application, can you really run a successful program? So.
Some questions really quick. And Cheryl, sorry, is it possible to request an application that covers a specific number of sites? You may need to spell that out for me a little more, Jason. But I'm not sure what the question is, but you have to, when you put the application together, you list what specific sites you're serving. I don't know.
I believe there's a section for each site that you have to complete as well. Like
right, but
information will have to be completed for each site.
Can you hear me? I'll just ask. I was asking, like, specifically, a lot of times the application comes out and it has space for, say, 2 sites, and maybe you have 4 sites, and then you end up having to splice together a really big PDF, or have to save 2 or 3 of them as you go through the process. So I was asking about whether or not you could say, my program proposal is going to have 4 sites. Can I get a PDF that has that many places for that to fill out?
Yeah, I think we deal with that every year with Kim. I don't know if Kim's still on here or not. But yeah, when we put it together, we'll try to make sure we add a couple more for you, so we don't constantly have that problem. And a question from Jocelyn: does the reader read one entire grant, or do readers just read particular sections? We're going to get into that a little bit later, but we have readers that we qualify, all with after school experience. They read the entire proposal. So if that helps. Will there be an intent to apply window? Yes, probably. But with that said, Penny, thanks for the question. You don't have to submit that. Just because you submit, or if you don't submit, doesn't mean you can't apply. But what the intent to apply does, it sort of helps give us an idea on how many proposals we're going to have. So, you know, we can be prepared with adequate amount of peer reviewers.
Jimmy, there was one more question a little bit earlier from Casey. Is the time frame 1 month when the grant is released and when the grant is closed? And I think
we usually give what?
You said 6 to 8 weeks, Jimmy?
6 to 8 weeks usually.
And again, that'll be listed on the application when it's due.
Yep. Okay, Cheryl, I think you're good.
So just to kind of get into a little more specific details about, you know, common mistakes. You know, if it's turned in late, the due date again is set in stone, time and date. So just make sure you plan ahead, give yourself plenty of time. Turning in the application can ruin months of work. It can be a difference in your proposal being funded or not. Again, if it's turned in late, it's an automatic disqualification, no exceptions there. If it's out of order, again, this is one of the things we had talked about a minute ago. One of the biggest issues with readers is that your application's out of order. Again, they're instructed not to look through the application and try to piece together where things are supposed to go. So this could result in 0 points being scored if it's out of order, or if they're to, you know, they're not to assume anything. And if it's not spelled out clearly, they're just gonna give you 0 points, and that would be unfortunate for your program after, you know, months of hard work putting that together. So just make sure it's in the right order, check and double check many times, I would say. Incomplete or missing sections, failing to complete or neglecting to submit pieces of the application, what was in point deductions or disqualifications. Be sure every number within each section has been answered. Once the deadline's passed, you are not permitted to submit missing pieces. And just make sure, again, all the attachments have been attached. So Jimmy, anything else on that? You've been through this with the 21st century.
I have. So, and I don't know if we're going to get to this or not. So Cheryl, forgive me if I get to this. So when we talk about missing pieces, for example, you've submitted your application, you've submitted it on time. Oh, these are just some common, okay. These are just some common mistakes we see. Like for example, no signature, let's see. And again, just some missing pieces, but so let's say you've mailed it, you've emailed it to us, you've gotten it done on time, everything's great, you're feeling good, and then you realized, oops, we forgot to send our needs assessment. Okay, what you have to do is you have to, now in normal years when they all get mailed or hand delivered to us, in those type of scenarios, you have to physically come here, request the copy, take the copy out, put your information in, and give it back to us. That's an OA thing. For now, if that happens, I believe, Cheryl, we've decided that notify us, request, I guess you just have to notify us and then just send us the new documentation. So whatever was missing, send us everything back with the information included in it, but you have to notify us.
You have to notify us that that's the one you want us to score, not the original.
Correct.
Right.
Because that has happened too.
And I would guess the same for email as well. You know, say you leave your needs assessment out, you can't just email us the needs assessment and
Correct.
say, you add this to that application. You have to resend the whole thing, because otherwise it can just get confusing. And I would hate for something to get mishandled. Not that we would do that, but you know, we're all human. So we want to make sure we have the whole application all together as one. So.
Absolutely. And I think we're good on questions. Thank you for answering that, Colleen.
Any other questions on that? See any in the chat box, Brad, Jimmy?
I am not.
I think we're good.
We might get done with you guys early. Okay, back to the basics, following directions. Now, obviously, things are going to maybe look a little bit different this year, but in typical years, if you choose to not hand deliver it, if you choose to mail it to us, be sure to follow these rules here. If you add any fancy bindings, we'll literally remove them. Number your pages, lower right-hand corner. If there's formatting issues with that, just let us know.
Just make sure you're not reformatting. If you do it electronically, please try not to reformat the application itself.
Absolutely. Okay, I think you can move on. Check and recheck math. Cheryl covered that, but I can't stress it enough, because even if you get the grant, you score high enough, we've still got to go through and make sure everything adds up. So it's just easier on everyone to make sure we have that done. And I've always sort of advocated that at least have 3 people, one of whom has little knowledge of after school, to actually review your grant. They may see something that just doesn't make sense, and it might be the thing that gets your score higher. So it takes a team to put these things together, I promise.
Right. Well, and like Jimmy said too, you know, just one little mistake or 1 0 off can make a big difference. You know, when you talk about making sure it all adds up from your program need to how you're going to meet that need, and then your budget. If you put $20,000 for transportation, or you need 20,000, but you only put 2,000, they may question that and be like, well, you know, you said you have this huge transportation need, but you only put $2,000. So that might kind of raise a red flag with the readers if you accidentally put something in the math wrong or inadvertently. So just kind of, it's not just about the addition, it's making sure that your budget reflects what you have in your needs assessment and goals.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cheryl. Describing your plan, make sure your plan is well described, obviously, from beginning to end. Like I said, have someone not familiar with your program read your application. Doesn't make sense to them. There's that consistency word again. Did you reference the same number of kids to be served consistently throughout the application? Did you reference the same number of sites to be serving students? Does your plan serve the need and serve the students that need to be served? Does the budget support the plan? So basically what I've been saying the entire time, be consistent. If there's anything you think a reader or readers would question, try your best just to spell it out. Cheryl mentioned acronyms earlier. That can be a problem because someone that's obviously not from your area is going to have no idea what that acronym is unless you spell it out for them, okay? Plagiarism. Obviously, that is very, very bad and a no-go. And you wouldn't think there'd be a lot of this, but in one live reading, this is years ago, a group of peer reviewers were reviewing a grant, and their hands raised because they said, we need to see the grant from 2 grants ago. Because so basically what this organization or district did was they took another grant and literally turned in the same grant, just put their name on it. So that's very, very bad. So you will be signing a couple of plagiarism disclaimers. Obviously, you know, no one here is going to do that, but we do have a lot of people from year to year that either, well, during non-COVID times will visit us here at the department and look at previous grants, or in some cases we've sent previous grants, but we keep receipts on all those. So just in case anything would happen. So obviously we know not to do this, but it has and probably will continue to happen. So.
And Jimmy, I think this next slide kind of goes along with that question we had earlier.
Okay. No site can be included on more than one application. School administrator signing off on the grant should know which entities are applying to serve the students and only select one entity to serve a site. Furthermore, one site may not be divided into some grade levels served by entity A and other grade levels served by entity B. So, and that's happened before in the past too, but it's just gotten too rough in terms of data collection and keeping, you know, things going. So from here out, that's what we're going to have to stick to. Submitting multiple applications. You may submit multiple applications for different districts. However, it's a very, very strict competition, and doing that, again, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but you're essentially competing against yourself, which sometimes that works. Other times you may get one, you may not get another. So again, it's a very, very stiff competition. So just keep that in mind if you're submitting multiple applications.
Any questions on that?
Not seeing anything.
And feel free again to unmute.
Absolutely. Okay.
All right. Oh, Jimmy, we might be
Grant reading, where are we at on time?
Well, we got 10 slides left and we started at 10:20. So we could probably get through this and be done, or we could
and then take questions. Okay.
take questions. And take another break and then finish up?
That's fine. However you want to do it. You want to do that now or you want to wait?
Doesn't matter.
Let's get through some grant reading stuff. So, you know, someone just sent me a question. Serving different districts, do they need to be different applications or they can all be on one? Gary, that depends. I think in your instance, you know, you can serve different districts on an application. Like you said, that is correct. Yeah, you can do that. Or do they need to be in different applications? No, they can be all on one, under one umbrella, Gary. That help you? Yep, absolutely. So let's talk about the grant reading a little bit because it usually takes us about a week to get them read. It is a very exhausting week, but all of our readers have after school knowledge, expertise, but we train them not to assume or fill in any gray areas, okay? Everything needs to be completely described, provided within the grant. And like I've said, they may not be familiar with acronyms, but we make them sign off on multiple conflict of interest statements. The people or the pair that reads your proposal will have no connection to your area, school, or anyone working in it. So some things we've observed over the last grant reading, and again, this is just our opinion. Reminder that it is not preferred for administrator or executive salaries to be paid for with the grant. If their contract covers all school activities and services, it would not be allowed to pay them additionally with 21st Century Grant funds. Partnerships, the readers wanted to see all programs with a minimum 2 partners, obviously. As reminders,
Sorry.
Forgot.
Accident.
As a reminder, partners can be secured in your community or elsewhere in the state or country. Think of your partners as those who provide a service to your program without paying a fee, as that is, as we talked about previously, considered a vendor. Now, again, if they are giving you a really great rate for service, then make sure you explain that, okay, clearly to the readers so they understand.
And Jimmy, just to add to that first bullet right there, that, you know, we're not saying you can't pay an administrator or an executive salary. It's just you have to make sure that their contract with the school doesn't cover all school day activities. You know, it would be hard to differentiate when that contract ends and when the 21st century one begins. So, you know, it's reasonable to allocate a percentage of, you know, to management of the grant, but you have to make sure that the school contract doesn't, you know, run at the same time as 21st century programming. So just to clarify a little bit on that. So.
And I've got a quick question, Cheryl. Would project director be considered an administrator? Honestly, Fielding, it would depend. I would lean to probably not. But for example, if you take a superintendent who's typically, you know, on call all the time, 100% paid by the district, it gets really, really difficult to justify, you know, paying that person to be the project director also. So
also under contract with the school during after school hours.
Correct. So, but I would think a vast majority of our program directors don't fall under that. So I would think in your case, Fielding, just depending on who that person was going to be, I would say that they would not be considered an administrator.
Great, thank you.
Uh-huh.
If you do have those positions in your application, again, just make sure in your budget narrative section, you explain that really well. So, you know, they don't like raise a little question like, well, you know, I'm not sure they have, you know, administrators. It's allowable. It's just not preferred, you know, and if you do it, just like I said, explain it really well in the budget narrative section.
Absolutely. Bear with me. I'm typing. Okie dokie. And some additional things. Obviously, there's that consistency again. Numbers of ages of kids served, sites, the need for plan reflected throughout the entire application. If you indicate you will be doing something that requires money but is not in the budget because you have other funds, you should clearly explain how it will be paid for, so the readers know you didn't just leave it out. So some good examples are transportation required trainings. If your program's going to have a heavy robotics focus, and we all know the goods that come with that and the fun things, but it's not in the budget and it's not explained, the readers are going to think, well, how are they going to pay for all these great, robotics things? So just make sure you explain that. While paying regular day teachers is allowed for the service in the 21st century, be mindful of possible teacher burnout if grant proposed to use said teachers. You may want to address how you can avoid that. I know that was quite a topic of the last one. Again, I always advise readers that, I don't know that that's something you take away points for, but I would definitely address it as a comment in the rubric, so that in the event that you don't maybe score high enough, you can take that information and learn from it.
Right. Any questions on that?
And just for clarification, the grant that's on, or the 21st Century Grant that's on the website now, it should be for our last our competition, which was a couple years ago. So it'd be the cohort 11. So Brad says he's going to post at the end. Again, the scored sections in there, so need, design, partners, budget, sustainability, those scoring areas aren't going to change. Okay. Now, again, in my opinion, something could happen. So if one of them changes between now and again, don't blame me, because anything can change. So,
Any questions? No?
not seeing anything.
Okay. So I just want to cover real briefly on our rules at DESE, what we do once the applications are received, and what we do not, I guess I should say. So we do not, Jimmy and I, Cindy, Kim, we don't actually score the application. As we just stated, we use readers. We don't influence any scoring, and we don't give preferential treatment or answers. I think Jimmy had just touched on that briefly. Once we open the grant, any questions need to be sent to a third party, which is the email that will be provided at the end. And, we'll have to give relatively generic answers. We can't, give any answers that would sway or change anything in your application. So just FYI on that. What we do pre-grant reading, we make sure the application is eligible. So Jimmy and I will go through a checklist typically before we give it to our grant readers. We complete a demographic sheet based on numbers that can, be in regards to free and reduced lunch, because that comes back to the absolute priority. If you don't have 40%, then keep a log of questions received and answers provided. So those answers that do come into that third party, we do keep a log of those. And post-grant reading, we double check all the scores and the budgets for errors and compliance. At that point, that's when we may reach out to you to clarify items on your budget or hours, that kind of thing. Again, we may contact you. We rank the scores from highest to lowest, determine the awards with the highest score until funding runs out. And then we will route the grants to be awarded through DESE. And then the results will typically be released, we're estimating late September. By the time, like I said, we open the grant, allow 6 to 8 weeks, do the reading, do the scoring. Just a reminder to not call, please. September 1st, we do say late September. So these grants would be implemented in the fall. And I think it was on one of the slides earlier that, there could be a potential, later on in the year start date, but just to plan for that. So, but typically we have those released by late September. And there is the contact information once the grant opens, or even now, to send those questions to. Jimmy and I will also put our individual emails in the chat box if you guys have any questions. Any questions overall right now that we can cover, we're happy to stay on. I mean, we finished
Absolutely.
early, but we're happy to stay on for as long as you guys need us, or if you feel more comfortable emailing it to us. Like I said, Jimmy and I will put our emails in the chat box.
So you want to take it back to the,
Yeah, just let me get my email in there.
we're finding that these Zoom trainings tend to make the presentations a lot shorter. Normally when we do these live, it's all about, 4 or 5 hours. Just had something for parents. It is most convenient to start when the school year starts. Is there any way to release grants in August? You know, and Jocelyn, another great question. A lot of that's out of our hands. To be very, very honest with you. We turn them around in our office really, really fast. So in other words, we'll get the proposals that made it processed quickly. Then it's just however long it takes to get through the department. So we do our part really quick. It's, you know, just the red tape of going through a large state agency. I hope that helps.
I'm answering Tracy's question. Do you say it after the grant act opens, questions only sent to the general email? That is correct. It has to go to that third-party email so we can track it all individually.
And to Richard's question, how deep do we need to go with family engagement? As deep as necessary. It's, you know, a requirement of the grant. Again, what do the families need, and in your area, and then how well will you illustrate that in your proposal? Because again, that piece is part of the law. So I'd say you need to go as deep as possible with it, but not so much so that it overshadows what you're actually doing with the students, if that helps.
I had a question that was sent to me. Do you know at this point how much you will have to award?
I don't off the top of my head. We could get that back to you. I mean, usually I'm ballparking here, so forgive me. I usually want to say it's around 15-ish million, something like that. But don't get mad at me if I told you the wrong number. And kind of like Cheryl said, we start with the top score and work our way down. So whatever each person, whatever their budget is, and keep in mind, not everyone's awarded their full budget. There's obviously going to be some things maybe that aren't allowable, that we have to address. It's not usually a lot, but that does happen. And to expand a little bit on Tracy's question about once the grant opens, questions onto the email, you can also call, but I would highly recommend emailing, just so you have a paper trail with the answer. And that's just me being, you know, if let's just say I'm the person you call me, I give you an answer. If I'm not right, and then you put it on your application, well, we talked, but I talk to a lot of people every day and I may not remember. But if you've emailed me, then you can get at least there's a paper trail with it.
Gary, I have a question for you. Gary Beckman, you had a question, and I think, Jimmy, you answered it. If serving different districts, do they need to be on different applications, or can they all be on one? So for that one, Gary, and you can unmute if you want, or we can talk afterwards too. So are you saying if you were like a CBO and you were providing services to 2 different districts?
I believe so. He is, and that's what we're doing right now.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
So just quick question, Jimmy, on that one, just for my own knowledge. So who signs off on that if you're serving 2 different districts? Do both superintendents have to sign off then? Yes,
absolutely. And luckily for Gary, in one case, they're smaller districts. So, so yeah. You're not going to see that as often, but yes, it is possible to do that.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I had just one quick question.
Yeah.
I did see where, this was back in the budget discussion, but it was suggested that we go with just our full budget for all 5 years in our proposal, and then you're going to reduce that, or should we just go ahead and if we know that reduction, we know that 20% reduction, 40% reduction, and go ahead and plan for that ahead of time, or should we just go with our full budget all 5 years?
I would do that, honestly, because we're going to reduce it for you anyway in years 4 and 5. And that's come up, unfortunately, in the past where people did go ahead and reduce. Well, then what happens if their math was off or something goes haywire? Now you've just got $20,000 less. So yeah, to answer your question, I would go with the former on that.
And just to kind of further expand on that, if you go ahead and reduce your budget and you say in year 4, well, I only need 250,000, but we look at for the reductions, we look at the average of your first 3 budgets. So if you put 250,000, but your diminished amount is actually 300,000, we can't give you that 300,000 because you put 250,000 there. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, it does.
And trust me, it happens.
Yeah.
What else does everybody have? I'm getting the feeling this is going to be a pretty competitive round, Cheryl.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, again, we've put in our emails, and I think most of you on here now have my number. So between now and the release date, you can call, email, with anything, bounce ideas off of us, whatever you want to do. Doesn't always make us right, but we've seen a lot. So how many grants will be awarded? Great question. I can't actually give you that answer, unfortunately. Usually, honestly, it depends on how many we receive, but I want to say, and Kim, help me out if you can hear, usually we're in about the 15 to 20 range, something like that. Does that sound about right?
And it probably depends on their budgets too, right?
It does. And that's a great point. You know, like I say, we start from the top score and work our way down. And so once, you know, each total makes that, you know, 15 million, whatever the number is, that starts shrinking. So, you know, it's every point counts. But again, kind of like I said earlier, don't base your proposal around bonus points. Because usually people that do that end up either, if they're lucky enough to get the grant, then things may not jive. So,
right. And they're not usually a huge amount competitive, or yeah, bonus points are usually 1 or 2 points maybe.
And yes, Gabby, and I think this, whoop, I just lost it. Now a bunch of questions are coming in.
The technical start of the date is, we won't know really until we get all the applications in and scored, and we'll let you know if you're awarded. We'll let you know when your start date is. You know, for example, for SAC, we notified them that the official start of their date was November 30th. But we didn't, I don't think we were able to notify them until what, Jimmy, the first week of December. But they were able to backdate things to the technical start of the grant was November 30th. They're
Absolutely.
November 30th.
And I think this just came to me, but just to clarify, our budget in the application needs to include a 5-year projection. Yes. So that example we showed you, that will actually be in the grant. You'll need to fill that out. Can we request the same amount of funding each year, or will it automatically be reduced per year? So with that, I mean, you can do that. We will automatically reduce it in years 4 and 5. But I mean, you can, yeah.
Well, and it's good to plan for it, you know, and that's where the, you know, possible that sustainability comes in. You know, you have to be able to sustain the same type of programming with possibly less money from our funds. You know what I mean?
So can a proposal be submitted as a consortium of nonprofit or educational institutions? Yes.
And there's more information on that in the application as well. And I think, Jimmy, we might have missed one from Tracy. Our roles as supervisors.
I'm sorry, I must have missed that one.
Each grantee is a supervisor. Yes, that is correct. What is the role of the supervisor? So Jimmy and myself, essentially, once you're awarded, we kind of are the compliance monitoring side of it. We monitor your budgets, we approve payments, we answer questions in regards to spending, compliance, monitoring, that kind of thing. Jimmy, anything else you can?
I'd say that's pretty much it. Once you get
a lot with the after-school network. Sorry, go ahead.
We're the ones that make sure you actually do everything you said you were going to in your competitively scored proposal.
And according to the law.
And according to the law, right. And also really quickly, so we don't forget, big thank you to the Missouri Afterschool State Network, Brad, helping us put this together, because we are, I'm not the greatest at Zoom. Cheryl's come along a little bit, but yeah, so big thank you to those guys for helping us out with that.
And Brad, just is your website posted anywhere in the links if they wanted information?
We can definitely put it in there.
Okay.
Yep.
If you wanted to get more information from the Missouri Afterschool Network, they have their own YouTube channel. So
And again, feel free to email us with questions. We are absolutely available to all of you.
I mean, there's a question you'd probably be able to answer better. Can we discuss some pitfalls programs have had when writing the grant for a second time?
Did I, where's that at? I'm sorry.
Casey?
Bear with me.
Kind of wanted to ask.
Bear with me.
I hear someone talking, but I can barely hear them.
Yeah, go ahead, Casey.
I just wanted to kind of ask if there was any pointers or any kind of like, I know that there's pitfalls when you're writing a second grant, especially about duplicating content that was there existing before, you know, and I just kind of wanted to see if you had anything to say about that or if any other.
So, yeah, so Casey asked about pitfalls programs or applicants have when writing a grant for the second time. So that would be from a perspective of someone who is currently funded maybe right now, and they're getting ready to write a second grant. Biggest thing you're going to want to focus on with that is how, Casey, you're going to expand and enhance your program to provide services not currently provided by your program. That makes sense. Okay. And we cover that. It was kind of quick, but yeah, that's probably the biggest piece there. And then addressing in your application, this is what we have done. We've done this, you know, really well, high quality program. This is how we're going to take it to the next level by adding these components.
Okay. So that language of like, you know, like leveling up, you know, like
Sure. Yeah.
I kind of frame it in that space because there's some things that we have to continue to do or
Sure.
fail. But okay, thank you.
Sure.
I just wanted to make sure that was okay. Thanks.
Now, Amy, your question. Oh, sorry. Were you done, Casey? I couldn't hardly hear you.
I'm
She-
done.
Amy?
More than one applicant be awarded.
That is I think that's what we said this year cannot happen.
Can more than one applicant be awarded the
More than
grant
one
that works
application.
with the same school district? Yeah, no, not now.
No, I think we've changed that.
Yeah, it just gets too difficult with data. Yeah.
That's what we said. We had talked about when we talked about submitting multiple applications that the school administrator signing off on the grants would have to decide which entity
Correct.
they would partner with.
And let's see, the number of children reserved has been reduced during the pandemic. If we are to write the proposals as if in a normal year, how do we minimize the appearance of submitting inflated numbers? Should we say, okay, great question. If awarded, that's when you'll work with myself or Cheryl as your supervisor to develop the plan for whatever the situation is in your area. Okay, so just to give you an example, so last spring when everything shut down, you know, school districts obviously closed, but our after school programs were able to keep functioning. We had to have a clear line of communication for what are you doing to serve, you know, families and kids in a safe manner while still serving them so I can reimburse you for payment. And so each program did that and they did a great job with it. Now, sort of with the start of this school year, we've worked with each of our programs to what's your situation. If you're in person, obviously that's pretty easy. If you're hybrid, you know, that can still happen. If you're virtual, okay. So here, if you're virtual, then probably going to see that attendance drop a little bit, but that's going to be understood by us. We're going to be very flexible on that. Okay. As long as you can demonstrate you're still serving the kids virtual or however it is you're serving them. Does that make sense?
I think what she's asking too, Jimmy, is should they use pre-pandemic numbers during the survey portion? So I would say, yeah, go ahead and use the pre-pandemic numbers and, you know, maybe mention like due to COVID, our numbers were lower currently, or, you know, at the end of 2020, you know, obviously we know COVID happens. But yeah, would you recommend using the pre-pandemic numbers? I would.
I think we've told them to write it as if everything was going to be normal, whether it is or isn't.
And just explain, you know, our numbers are lower this year, but this is what we had prior to the pandemic.
Absolutely.
I had a question come to me, excuse me, that somebody missed when you were talking about the average number of grants that are awarded. Jimmy, can you just repeat how many, you know, on average?
And it's difficult to say by year because it depends on the funding I mean, usually it's in the 20s, I'm going to say, but you know, I'm trying to think back to cohort 11. It can be less, but it's usually not. Sometimes it can be more. It really just depends. Depends on how many we get, what those that do receive it, how much they ask for. There's a lot of variables, so it's impossible to put an actual number on it, but I'd say average 20. I say that, and this year there'll be like 32. Yeah, absolutely. Stephanie, it's I think Brad might have put a link to it, but it's dese.mo.gov. Brad, did you put it? You put a link to the application, right?
Yeah, I just posted it again.
Okay, thank you.
And again, just keep in mind that's the previous cohorts, so
Yeah.
it may change a little bit. Once the grant opens, the new one will be posted and the old one will be taken down.
Absolutely.
And this presentation, I believe Kim said would be posted. The slides will be posted on our website in that same area.
Great question. How many do we receive? Again, it depends. I'm really interested to see this year, after everything we've been through. We just did a SAC competition and we had a record number of applications for SAC. That's our sort of smaller funding stream. So, you know, and Kim, if you're still on here, yeah, Kim's still on here. You know, what do you think? Usually around the 60s, something like that.
Yeah, anywhere from the high 40s to the low 60s typically.
Yeah. And there are years where we think we're going to have hundreds just because, you know, the first 2 weeks we might get 30 in. We're like, oh my gosh, we're not going to be able to read all these, but then it usually balances out.
Any other questions?
I have a quick one. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I have a quick one related to the earlier question that I asked about grant start date and potentially backdating, you know, like if the grant start date is technically, you know, September 1st, but we don't find out until September 30th, then we can still backdate for salary and things like that, correct?
Correct.
But so when we're planning for our budget, do you guys have a suggestion about when we should, you know, I mean, because if we start our program in August, do we plan the budget as of an August start date? Would you suggest we plan it as September or October? I just don't want to put too much money in the salary portion and then not be able to necessarily get it all or have to do a bunch of budget amendments because we planned incorrectly.
Yeah, and Jocelyn had a good answer that they always budget for the entire school year. And it really depends. For example, you know, there are some programs that may be, you know, writing to expand or enhance, and they can just get going out of the gate. You know, whereas if you're brand new, you know, even though we say your start date is September the 5th, you know, you've still got to hire people. You've still got to, you know, get those pieces in place. So we give you wiggle room in that instance. I don't know if that helped you at all or not. You want to jump in there, Cheryl?
No, I mean, I think that kind of sums it up.
Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Did you see that question from Kathy?
This one was an earlier question.
Yeah.
It's an earlier question that she had asked, and you had mentioned maybe wait until the end or maybe an email conversation, Jimmy.
Fall and fail. Whoop. Oh, now another one came up. Cheryl, can you take that next one?
Yep.
And,
oh, it's her again.
Okay. Kathy, how about why don't you shoot me an email afterwards and we'll get into all that. How about that?
And Kathy, just to clarify on your second question there, it says we are going to address the numbers of days of service too, i.e. we do 5 days per week of ASC, half days of summer camp in June when school is doing summer school. Just keep in mind when you're doing summer school that you still have to have the traditional before and after the school summer school. Does that make sense? Correct, Jimmy?
Correct.
You can't operate the summer school programming during actual summer school time. I'm not sure what the ASC is, Jimmy, and that just
that I don't know. We may just after school club. Okay. We may just.
Oh, sorry.
We'll just take those. We'll just take those. It's because it's so program specific that I don't want to get too out of the weeds. So Kathy, we'll take care of you afterwards.
Okay.
What else? Had a pretty sharp group today. These are some of the better questions I think we've ever received on one of these.
Any other questions? And feel free to unmute.
Once again, big shout out to the Afterschool Network for helping us put this thing together.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
We were talking about before and after school, making sure it wasn't during school time. At first, I was kind of hearing that answer like it needed to be during summer school, the weeks that summer school is in session, doing before and after school, but also after school is completely dismissed for school and for summer. And there are those weeks in between before starting the next year's program. That would also be acceptable, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, just when the school is actually operating the summer school is what I meant, that traditional before and after.
During school hours is a no-no.
Right.
Gotcha.
Awesome. Well, again, big thank you to the Afterschool Network. If you have questions, feel free to email me, email Cheryl, give us a call, and we can help you in any way possible up until the day the grant drops.
And all of our contact information is on the website as well. We put our emails, and I put my phone number in there. Jimmy, I don't know if you want to put your
I'll
work.
put, yeah, let me get my number. Wait, I want to send it
Feel
to
free to contact us anytime and let us know if you have any questions.
Oops, I guess I could have put my name.
Brad, did we talk about, this was going to be posted, the link for the presentation was actually going to be posted on our portal.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll edit some, just for time, not any content, but we'll edit for time and get that posted on the MASN website. And then we can post a link to that recording on the DESE portal. So we'll send probably an email to everyone in attendance, actually probably everybody that registered. We'll have information on how to access the slide deck as well as where you can find the recording. So probably, I would say by the end of this week.
Okay.
Awesome, Brad.
We'll get
Thank
that
you.
information out.
Great. Thank you for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, all for joining us and
Absolutely. Good luck writing.
great questions.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Everyone, take care.
Thank you, guys.